Hi everyone, Namaste. So in the last video class, we completed catalysis topic. So catalysis is the process of enhancing the rate of a process by additional substance. Those are called catalysts. So catalysis are number of types are the same. Homogeneous is there, heterogeneous is there, autocatalysis is there. Also induced catalysis is also there. So all these are the catalysis process. So one theory which explains the mechanism of catalysis, so that theory is the adsorption theory of catalysis. Adsorption theory of catalysis. So this explains simply how a catalyst can be increases the rate of a process. So what the adsorption theory is, suppose we are taking a process A plus B produce formation of a bond between AB. So A and B combined together formation of product AB. Now in this reaction, if we are not using catalyst, so the process will be happen, but it will be very slow process. But if we are using catalyst, so process will be speed process. So what is the use of catalyst? Catalyst increases the speed of the process. How it increases? That explained by adsorption theory. According to this theory, the catalyst always possesses free valences. So the surface of catalyst will produce free valences, which is also called active centers. So this is the simply we can call shape of a catalyst. On this surface of the catalyst, they possess unpaired electrons, also called free valences or active sites. So all these are the active sites of the catalyst. So what are these active sites? So these active sites has high adsorbing capacity. So it will adsorb the reactants what are participating in the reaction. So based on this adsorption theory explains a catalyst can catalyze rate of a process in three steps. So in the first step, adsorption of reactants. So whatever the reactants are present, that will be adsorbed in the process on the surface of the catalyst. Suppose this we are taking as a catalyst. So in the first step, it will adsorb the reactants A and B, formation of a product like this. So A will be adsorbed on this side, B will be adsorbed on this side. So in the second step, step 2 is called formation of intermediate. The first step is adsorption of reactants, second step is formation of intermediate. So intermediate means after the adsorption of reactants, they will provide the whatever the conditions required and they make bond between A and B. So this is called intermediate. In the final step, so in the final step, desorption of products. So first step is called adsorption, the last step is called desorption. So adsorption of reactants, desorption of products. So desorption means removal. So after the formation of A bond B, that will be released from the catalyst surface. This A bond B will be released as AB and remaining as usual catalyst surface will be same like this. That means catalyst does not changes in the process. Only it will enhance the formation of product. So A and B combine together formation of AB. But so this combining capacity will be more in presence of catalyst. So that means catalyst does not undergo any chemical change. It just increases the rate of a process. So this theory is called adsorption theory. Mainly three steps in adsorption theory. First step is called adsorption of reactants. Second step is formation of intermediate. Third step is the desorption of products. So based on these steps, any catalyst can catalyze the process. So this is about catalysis. So catalyst has mainly two important properties. So properties of catalyst has two. One is called activity, another one is called selectivity. So these are the two properties of catalyst. One is the activity, another one is the selectivity. So what is activity? Activity explains the capacity of a catalyst. That means one catalyst can catalyze how many reactions. So that is called activity. For example, mostly all catalysts can catalyze 1 million reactants per minute. So that means catalysts are highly active. They can catalyze number of reactants. So mostly from group number 5 to 11. So in the periodic table from group number 5 to 11, all these are D block elements. So most of the D block elements are highly active catalysts when compared with whatever the S block or P block. So number of chemical reactions when you are observing, wherever you are using catalyst, mostly D block elements we are using. That means mostly from group number 5 to 11 are highly active catalysts. Why they are highly active catalyst means, as I told, catalyst surface possess free valencies or active sites, or also called unpaired electron. So transition elements have more unpaired electrons, so more the absorbing capacity. So that's why group number 5 to 11 are mostly active catalysts. So activity means explain the capacity of a catalyst, how it can catalyze. Second one is selectivity. What selectivity? Selectivity explains the probability of a product. So which product can be formed? That is also by using the catalyst we can identify. For example, so selectivity explains the possibility or probability of a product. See this reaction, carbon monoxide combining with hydrogen here. Here also carbon monoxide combining with hydrogen. Here also carbon monoxide combining with hydrogen. So, but if we are using nickel catalyst, the product is methane gas. If we are using copper, zinc oxide, chromium oxide, the product is methanol. If we are using copper, the product is methanol, formaldehyde. So, based on the catalyst what we are using, the product will be changed. So, that is called selectivity. Activity explains capacity, selectivity explains the probability. So, which product can produce? That depends on which catalyst we are taking. So, catalyst has two properties. Activity, that is highly active. One catalyst can catalyze 1 million reactions. Similarly, selectivity explains probability of a product. If we want to produce methane, we must use nickel catalyst. If we want formaldehyde, we must use copper. So, for a particular catalyst, we get particular product. So, these are the two important properties of catalyst. So, that's about catalysis. Same like catalyst, another one is there enzymes. So we all know that enzymes are biocatalysts. That means these are the living organisms which can catalyze number of biochemical reactions. So enzymes are biocatalysts. But remember, since these are the living species, so these require some specific conditions. So enzymes are highly active under specific temperature, normally room temperature. Similarly, they are highly active under specific pH. The pH range is nearly 5 to 7. Just I am explaining. So nearly pH range 5 to 7 and nearly room temperature. So these are the conditions required for the activity of enzymes. So enzymes are highly active under optimum temperature, optimum pH. Similarly, they are also highly active in presence of some inorganic ions like sodium ion, manganese ion, cobalt ion. In presence of some inorganic ions, they are highly active. So all these are the conditions which required for the activity of an enzyme. Because enzymes are living species, we must provide some specific temperature, specific pH. That is important. So enzymes are biocatalysts. So they can catalyze number of biochemical reactions. Reactions number of are there. Example, sucrose can be converted to glucose and fructose in presence of invertase enzyme. So like that number of reactions are there. Just you can practice that in the NCERT textbook. Just practice it. So same enzyme mechanism is also like adsorption theory. In the first step, they will absorb the reactants. Next, formation of intermediate. Next, desorption of products. So all mechanism is also the same. But for enzymes, mostly key and lock mechanisms are proposed. So key and lock mechanisms for enzymes mostly they are proposed, but whatever, so same mechanism, adsorption, formation of intermediate and desorption. So all are same. So enzymes also very simple topic. So another important catalyst is there. Those are called shape selective catalyst. What is shape selective catalyst means? Some catalyst possess a specific shape like honeycomb shape. So at that specific shape, reactant can be easily fitted. So they can easily catalyze the reactions. So such catalysts are called shape selective catalysts. They possess a particular shape like honeycomb shape. One of the shape selective catalysts is called zeolite. So zeolites are called shape selective catalysts. One important zeolite is ZSM5. It is the name of the shape selective catalyst. ZSM5 will convert alcohols to gasoline. So alcohols directly we can convert it to petroleum products by using one catalyst, that is called ZSM5. It is a shape selective catalyst, which means such catalysts possess a specific shape like honeycomb shape. So these are about catalysis and enzymes. So the next topic is important topic, colloids. So in the physical chemistry we completed solution chapter. So solution definition, it is a homogeneous mixture of two or more components. So same like colloid is also mixture, but colloid is a heterogeneous mixture. Solution is a homogeneous, colloid is a heterogeneous mixture. So both are the mixture. So both containing smaller part solute, larger part solvent. So colloids also containing disperse phase dispersion medium. Solutions also containing disperse phase dispersion medium. So the definition of colloids. So these are the heterogeneous mixtures in which the dispersed particles cannot be visible. So the range of the dispersed particle will be in between 1 to 1000 nanometers. So the size or diameter of colloidal particle will be 1 to 1000 nanometers. Remember how to identify which is a solution, which is a colloid. Solution. Another one is the colloid and another one is the suspension. Solution particle size will be less than 1 nanometer. When the particles are very small, that is less than 1 nanometer, then that produce solution. The particle size is in between 1 to 1000 nanometer and it will form colloid. Similarly, suspension, that will be greater than 1000 nanometers. The particle size are bigger, that will be suspension. In between 1 to 1000 nanometer, that will form colloid. Less than 1 nanometer, that will form solution. So how to distinguish? Very simple. See this. We are taking some water. In the water, suppose when we are adding some salt, salt is completely soluble. So whatever the dissolved particles are not visible with our naked eyes. That means because the particles of dissolves are very small size, less than 1 nanometer, so they form solution. If in normal water, when we are adding some soap particles, the soap particles also completely dissolved. Particles are not visible to us. But remember, the soap water is not a clear solution like NaCl solution. So that's why the soap water is a colloid, because the particle size is in between 1 to 1000 nanometers. If we are adding some mud we are adding to the water, so that is muddy water. The particles are clearly visible. That is called suspension. In suspension, particles are visible. In colloids and solution, both particles are not visible. But at the same time, these two are different. Solution is a homogeneous, whereas colloid is a heterogeneous. Both colloid and suspensions are heterogeneous, whereas solution is a homogeneous. In solution and colloid, similarity, particles are not visible. Difference, both are different pictures. This is the homogeneous and it is a heterogeneous. Remember it, based on the size we can identify which is a solution, which is a colloid, which are the suspensions. So in this chapter mostly we study about colloids. So the definition of colloids, these are the heterogeneous mixtures in which the dissolved particle size will be in between 1 to 1000 nanometers. So colloids are heterogeneous mixtures. So based on the nature of dispersed phase and dispersion medium, colloids are classified to 8 types. Remember it? Dispersed phase, dispersion medium. So dispersed phase means smaller part, we also call solute. Dispersion medium means larger part, we also call solvent. So solvent means dispersion medium, solute means dispersed phase. So based on the nature of dispersed phase and dispersion medium, colloids are classified to 8 types. Remember, colloids are 8 types based on dispersed phase and dispersion medium. So what are that? The first one is, if the dispersed phase is solid, dispersion medium is also solid. So possibility of a formation of colloid will be takes place. If the dispersed phase is solid, but the dispersion medium is liquid, solid in liquid, that is also colloid possible. Similarly, solid in gas, that is also possible. Same like, remember these are 3. Similarly, liquid in solid, liquid, gas. Similarly, gas in solid, liquid, gas. That is total 9 types are coming. Remember, solid in remaining 3 states, liquid in remaining 3 states, gas in remaining 3 states. Total 9 types are coming. But here gas and gas, that means gas is mixing with gas, it can never form colloid. Why? Because when two gases are mixing, it always forms homogeneous, it never forms heterogeneous. That's why colloids are heterogeneous, but gas in gas is homogeneous. That's why gas in gas is not a colloid. Remaining all colloids are possible. So solutions, whenever they are asking, solutions are 9 types. All solutions are possible. But colloids they are asking, colloids are only 8 types, because colloids are only heterogeneous mixtures. Gas and gas never form heterogeneous, they are always homogeneous. So that's why gas in gas is not a colloid, it is a solution. So total 8 types. So some examples also there, we can read in the NCERT table. So what is the example of solid in solid, solid in liquid? So number of examples are there, we have to practice that. So practice the table of colloids. So total 8 types based on dispersed phase and dispersion medium. That is one classification. In another classification, the classification is based on interactions between dispersed phase and dispersion medium. The first classification is nature of dispersed phase and dispersion medium. Colloids are 8 types. The second classification is based on interactions between dispersed phase and dispersion medium. That means between this solute and solvent, some interactions will be possible. If the interactions are stronger, then that is called lyophilic colloid. The interactions are weaker or repulsion interactions are there, then that is called lyophobic. There are 2 types of colloids based on interaction. One is lyophilic, another one is the lyophobic. So lyophilic, lyophobic based on interactions. So what are lyophilics are? So these are the colloids which has strong interactions between dispersed phase and dispersion medium. So lyophobic colloids has weak interactions or repulsions between dispersed phase dispersion medium. So that means due to strong interaction, if dispersed phase we are mixing in dispersion medium, they can easily make colloid. So these are easy to prepare. These are easy to prepare since both have strong interactions. But in lyophobic interactions are very weaker, so these does not directly we cannot prepare by mixing. So these require special techniques for the preparation. These directly we can prepare by mixing. These require special techniques for the preparation. So 2 points: strong interaction, weak interaction, easy to prepare, special techniques required to prepare. And lyophilic colloids are highly stable in nature, whereas lyophobics are less stable. So why these are highly stable? Already told, yes, strong interactions between these two dispersed phase and dispersed medium. So due to the strong interactions, the colloid is highly stable, whereas due to weak interactions, it can be easily removed. So this is a very unstable. So lyophobics are unstable, lyophilics are more stable, whereas lyophilics are reversible in nature. That means when we are mixing with solvent, they form colloid. So on evaporation, solvent can be removed. We can add another solvent also. So because these are easily reversible, we can remove solvent, we can add solvent. That is reversible. But in lyophobic, once we prepared, again we cannot remove the solvent. These are irreversible. These are reversible. So examples I am telling. Lyophilic colloids are starch, egg, albumin, gelatin, gum, etc. All these are lyophilic colloid. Starch, egg, albumin. So starch powder easily can mix with water, they form colloid. So egg albumin, the white color liquid in the egg is called albumin. That is also colloid. It can be easily soluble in water. So that is a lyophilic. Same like gelatin is mainly used in the stabilization of ice creams. Also gums, all these are the lyophilic. Lyophobic examples: metals, sulfur, etc. Sulfur colloid, metals colloid, or noble metals colloid, anything we can take. All these are the lyophobic. So lyophobics are unstable, irreversible. These require special techniques to prepare. So these containing weak interactions. 4 points. Lyophilics are highly stable, strong interactions, and reversible in nature. This can be easily prepared by mixing both viscous phase and dispersion medium. So these are the 2 types based on interactions. Another classification is there based on number of particles. So based on number of particles. So total mainly 3 classifications. First one is the nature of viscous phase and dispersed medium, 8 types. Second one is interactions, 2 types, lyophilic and lyophobic. However, so lyophilic, lyo means, sorry I didn't explain. Lyo means solvent, philic means loving. They are also called solvent loving colloids. Lyophobic means solvent hating colloids. So solvent loving means strong interaction. Solvent hating means no interactions. That is very simple. Lyophilic and lyophobic. Now third classification is based on number of particles. So based on number of particles, colloids are classified to 3 types. That is multimolecular, macromolecular, and the third one is associated colloids. So 3 types of colloids based on number of particles: multimolecular, macromolecular, and associated colloids. So based on number of particles, there are 3 types of colloids: multimolecular, macromolecular, and associated colloids. So what is multimolecular colloids means? Whenever the particle sizes are very small, so we require for formation of colloid minimum 1 to 1000 nanometers required. But whenever the particle size are very small, so they cannot form colloids. So that's why the more number of particles aggregate together and will achieve the colloidal range. So such types of colloids are called multimolecular. So multi means many. That means many molecules combined together, formation of a colloidal ring. Such colloids are called multimolecular colloids. So in multimolecular colloids, examples can be gold colloid, sulfur colloid, etc. Gold, sulfur colloids, etc. So the next one is macromolecular colloid. Macro means big size. So micro means big size, multi means small size and more number of molecules. When size is small, so more molecules required for the formation of colloid. That's why it is multimolecular. Examples: atoms and molecules like gold atom, sulfur, all these are the multimolecular. But macromolecular means when the colloidals are, When the dispersed phase particles are very big size, then directly they can form colloids. Such colloids are called macromolecular. Example here we can take starch. Similarly, cellulose, proteins, and all polymers. So all these are the macromolecular. So starch is a very big molecule. It is a polysaccharide. Cellulose is also polysaccharide. Protein is a polymer of amino acids. Polymers. All these are the bulky molecule. When bulky molecules are forming colloid, those are called macromolecular. When small atoms are forming colloid, those are called multimolecular. And the third one is associated colloids. So what are associated colloids? Associated colloid, one example, best example is the soap. Soap is an associated colloid. So what are associated colloids are? So actually associated colloids are the colloids, they will be formed at a specific concentration and also at specific temperature. So particular concentration, particular temperature when colloids are forming, those are called associated colloids. The best example will be soap. So soap is an associated colloid. We all know that the formula of soap will be C17H35COO Na. So this is the formula of soap. That is a common soap formula C17H35COO Na. Its structure should be like this. It contains alkyl chain and at the end this part will be there, COONA, and 17 alkyl groups are there. So like that all are alkyl and this is the ionic part. So this is called hydrophilic head and the remaining total part is called hydrophobic tail. So soap always containing hydrophobic tail part, hydrophilic head part. Since it has the charges, it is soluble in water. So it is the water soluble. Whereas it is just alkyl part. Alkyl means carbon part. So carbon is hydrophobic in nature. Either it is a dust or oil soluble. So tail part is oil soluble, whereas ionic part is head part is the water soluble. So when we are adding to water, so inside the water, if this is the water we are taking. So this tail part does not soluble in water, whereas the head part will be dissolved in water. Head parts containing positive and negative charge. So like this, soap particles will be dissolved. But at a specific concentration, all these soap particles will combine together, formation of a colloid. That colloid is called associated colloid. This associated colloid has another name, which is also called micelle. So it should be like this. All the tail parts will combine together on the surface. Head part should be like this, and formation of this type of structure is called associated colloid, also called micelle. MICELLE. So micelle or associated colloids are nothing but these are the colloids which are formed at a specific concentration, and that specific concentration is called CMC, critical micelle concentration. For soap it will be nearly 10 power minus 4 to 10 power minus 3 mole per liter. This is the concentration of soap to form a colloid. Similarly, at specific temperature, the temperature is called Kraft temperature. So that is nearly we can take as room temperature. So at specific temperature and at specific concentration, so colloids will be formed. Such colloids are called associated colloids. Best example of associated colloid is the soap. So soap always will form micelles on dissolving in water. So these micelles are responsible for the cleaning action of soap. These are the responsible for cleaning action of soap. So these are three types of colloids: multimolecular, macromolecular, and associated colloids. These are the types of colloids. The next topic is preparation of colloids. The next one is the preparation of colloids. So colloids can be prepared by a number of techniques. Among that, more important techniques are, the first one is chemical method. So chemical method means with the help of a chemical reaction we can prepare a colloid, that is called chemical method. For example, so we are taking FeCl3 on hydrolysis, we get FeOH thrice and 3HCl. So this is a colloid sol. So sol is the other name of colloid. So wherever sol is coming, that is also nothing but colloid. The colloid sometimes is also called sols. So FeOH sol will form by hydrolysis of FeCl3. So this reaction is the hydrolysis. Same like we are taking gold chloride, treating with formaldehyde and water. So we get gold sol plus 6HCl plus 3HCOOH. So gold sol can be prepared from the reduction of AuCl3. Gold chloride, this will be which on reduction. So this is the reduction process. Why it is reduction process? Means here Cl is removing. More electronegative atom and removing. The process is called reduction. So we get gold sol. The same like sulfur dioxide undergo oxidation with H2S. So this is the oxidation. So on oxidation will form sulfur chloride and water. Similarly, another reaction is there. AS2O3 on 3H2S will undergo double decomposition. We get AS2S3 plus 3H2O. So this is a double decomposition. So like that, number of chemical reactions. So with the help of chemical reactions, when we are forming colloid, that is called chemical method. So here hydroxide, ferric hydroxide is the colloid, gold sol, sulfur sol, arsenic sulfide sol. All these are the colloids based on chemical methods. So another method for the preparation is the second method will be Bradig's arc method. So Bradig's arc method is the second technique for the preparation of colloids. So it is the electrical disintegration of metals to form colloid. And this Bradig's arc method mostly applicable to noble metals. The noble metal colloids can be prepared by using Bradig's arc method. Noble metals like silver, gold, platinum, etc. So what is Bradig's arc method actually? In this we apply very high voltage of electricity through these metal electrodes. So these are dissolved in a solvent. So here electrodes are dispersed phase. This is the solvent, is the dispersion medium. On applying very high voltage of electricity, the very large amount of heat will be produced. That produced heat will vaporize the metal. So this is a solid metal. It is a noble metal, either gold, platinum, whatever. But on applying very high amount of electricity, so these metals undergo vaporization. That means solid is directly converted to vapor. So when these undergo vaporizations, they will form vapors by passing high voltage of current. And this total system is placed in ice bath for condensing. So this ice bath will condense these vapors and dissolve in the solvent. So these vapor particles will be dissolved in the solvent. So when vapor particles are dissolved in the solvent, so they will form colloids. So this technique is called Bradig's arc method. Very simple technique. In Bradig's arc method, So first metals we are converted to vapor phase, and that vapor phase on condensing into the solvent, so we get colloidals. This process is called Briggs-Stratton method, also called electrical disintegration method. With the help of high voltage, we can disintegrate metal and dissolve in the easily solvent, formation of colloids. Mainly applicable to noble metals, silver, gold, platinum. That is the Briggs-Stratton method. Rest in the surface chemistry, mostly examples they will ask which method is applicable to which process. So that one. The next one is, another important one is the peptidization. Peptidization is another important one. So peptidization is a process of formation of colloid to the freshly prepared precipitate by adding additional electrolyte. So this is simply any freshly prepared precipitate we can convert it to colloid by adding some suitable electrolyte. The process is called peptidization. So for example, see this. We are taking AgNO3 and NaI we are mixing. So AgNO3 solution, NaI solution we are mixing. So we get AgI precipitate plus NaNO3 solution. So on mixing of these two solutions of aqueous AgNO3 NaI, we get a precipitate of AgI and NaNO3 aqueous solution. Now see this, if in this reaction one of the reagents, suppose we are taking as an excess, suppose AgNO3 is an excess, when AgNO3 is present in excess amount, so this excess AgNO3 will combine with precipitate AgI. So AgNO3 and NaI combined, formation of AgI precipitate. But one of the reagent present in excess amount, and that excess reagent will again combine with precipitate. What is the precipitate here? AgI. Here AgNO3 is excess reagent. Now see this, among these two, the common is silver. Silver is the common ion. So these common ions will stabilize the precipitate. So AgI is the precipitate, but on this precipitate, when electrolyte are adding, it will stabilize and making of colloid. So on the surface of AgI, Ag plus will form. This total we are calling as colloid. So precipitate converted to colloid by adding of ions or electrolytes. The process is called peptidization, plus remaining whatever NO3 minus ion is there, and this NO3 minus ion again on the surface of this will be added like this. This total is the salt. On this salt surface again NO3 minus ions will be added. Again I am telling. So AgNO3 and NaI, both aqueous solutions when we are mixing, we get a precipitate of AgI and NaNO3 solution. Now this AgI precipitate can be converted to colloid by adding additional ions or electrolytes. And that additional ions no need to add extra. If you are taking one of the reagent in excess, that excess reagent will make precipitate into colloid. How it is? So AgI is the precipitate, whereas AgNO3 is the extra reagent. Here in the both, the common ion will be there, silver ion. The common ions will stabilize the precipitate by adding on the surface. So on the surface of AgI, Ag plus ions will be stabilize this precipitate. So formation of colloid. Since it is a positive charge, it will attract the negative NO3 minus ions. So between this positive charge and negative charge, some potential difference will be there. This potential difference we call zeta potential. It is the potential difference between the fixed layer and mobile layer. So which ion is stabilizing the precipitate? That is called stationary phase. And which ion is adding on the opposite charge? That is called mobile phase. So based on stationary and mobile phase, some potential difference will be exist. And that potential is called zeta potential, or also called electrokinetic potential. So this is the peptidization. So conversion of freshly prepared precipitate into colloid by adding extra electrolytes. Another example, in place of AgNO3, suppose NaI present in excess. If NaI is present in excess, Now this AgI precipitate will combine with extra NaI. Now what is the common ion here? Iodine is the common ion. So I minus Na plus. So I minus will stabilize the AgI. The colloid will be on the surface of AgI. I minus ion will be added. So this will be the salt. On this opposite charge, Na plus ion will be added. So between stationary phase and mobile phase, electrokinetic or zeta potential will be exist. So these are the peptidization process. So total 3 process. Chemical method, with the help of chemical reaction, we can prepare colloid. Redox method applicable to noble metals by using electrical disintegration. Third one is the peptidization. Precipitates, we can convert it to colloids by adding suitable electrolyte. Total 3 preparations of the colloids. So during the peptidization, colloids are forming charge. So based on which electrolyte is adding on the surface, it can form positive also, it will form negative also. So colloids will form charges. Colloids can be charges. So colloid can be positive charge or negative charge. So some examples I have given here. So these are the positive colloids and these are the negative colloids. So positive colloids example, hydrated metal oxides. So whenever metal oxides along with hydrated molecule is there, hydrated metal oxide, example rust, Fe2O3XH2O, Al2O3XH2O. Also metal oxides, also metal hydroxides. So all metal hydroxides, metal oxides, hydrated metal oxides, all are positive colloids. Another is the basic dyes. So dye means color. So basic dyes are example methylene blue is a positive colloid. Another one is the hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is also positive colloid. Similarly, negative colloids. All metals are negative colloids. Metal sulfides are negative colloids. Extra starch, gum, gelatin, clay, charcoal, all these are the negative colloids. Acidic dyes, eosin, comborate are negative colloids. Another important, blood. Remember, hemoglobin is a positive colloid, whereas total blood is a negative colloid. So blood is a negative, hemoglobin will be the positive. Just hemoglobin is just part of the blood. So this table is the most important. So this table will be asked in the exam. Not directly they will ask. They will ask about coagulation. So coagulation is based on the charge. So that's why charge we have to remember. Mostly sulfides, oxides, all the charge we have to remember. So colloids will be either positive or negative. So this is the preparation of colloids. So after preparation, we have to purify the colloids. So colloids can be purified by number of techniques. Purification of colloids. So colloids can be purified by number of techniques. One of the important technique is the dialysis. Another one is the electrodialysis. And the third one is the ultrafiltration. These three are important techniques for the purification of colloids: dialysis, electrodialysis, ultrafiltration. So what is dialysis is, in this process a colloid is purified by using a semi-permeable membrane. So we know that semi-permeable membranes are using for the osmosis technique. Same like in dialysis, the colloids are purified by using semi-permeable membrane. See this. So which colloid we have to purify? That we are taking in a semi-permeable membrane packet. So in this packet we are taking colloid, and through this colloid we are passing a stream of water. So on passing water, so this is made up of semi-permeable membrane. So semi-permeable membrane means which allows only small particles, that means solvent particles. So semi-permeable membrane allows only solvent particles. So when water we are passing through this, water will go inside. So inside whatever the impurities are there, it is soluble in water, and that water will again comes out. So impurities can be removed. So colloid, due to big size, colloid will not come outside, only impurity will come outside. This process is called dialysis. Simply by passing water through semi-permeable membrane, we can remove the impurities. The process is called dialysis. Same like electrodialysis. In this electrodialysis, we apply electricity through the electrodes. So one will be the positive, one will be the negative. So on applying electricity, whatever the ionic impurities are there, it will be attracted towards opposite charge electrode. Suppose it has negative ions impurities, the negative ions will be attracted towards positive electrode, positive ions attracted towards negative electrode. So to remove ionic impurities, we use electrodialysis. So dialysis, electrodialysis, both are same techniques. Only in electrodialysis we can remove ions also. So same like the third one is ultrafiltration. So in ultrafiltration, by using one filter paper, we can purify colloid, and that filter paper is called ultrafilter paper. So with the help of ultrafilter paper, we can purify colloid. What is ultrafilter paper is? If you are taking common filter paper, ordinary filter paper, in ordinary filter paper, the hole size will be bigger. To decrease the size of the holes, we are converting it into ultrafilter paper. How to convert? An ordinary filter paper on soaking in the colloidal solution. In this colloidal solution, when we are soaking the ordinary filter paper, what is the colloidal solution means? 4% nitrocellulose in alcohol and ether. 4% nitrocellulose in alcohol and ether. This solution is called colloidal. In these solutions, when we are soaking ordinary filter paper, so it is converted to ultrafilter paper, where size of the holes will be decreased. So it is used for the purification of colloid. So colloids are purified by using specially made filter paper, that will be ultrafilter paper, which is made by soaking ordinary filter paper in colloidal solution. This is the formula of colloidal solution. So these are the three techniques: dialysis, electrodialysis, ultrafiltration. So these three techniques are purification of colloids. The next one is the properties of colloids. So colloids properties. So colloids exhibit number of properties. Like the first one is colligative properties. So this colligative properties we have studied in the solution chapters also. There are four types of colligative properties, like relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation in boiling point, depression in freezing point, and osmotic pressure. So same like solutions, colloids also will show colligative properties. Why? Because solution is also mixture, colloid is also mixture. Just that one is homogeneous, this is the heterogeneous. So colloids will show colligative properties. Now, what is the difference in these colligative properties of solution and colloids are? In colloids, the range of colligative property will be lesser than the solution. In solution, colligative properties range will be high. That means boiling point highly increases. That in colloids, boiling point very small increasing. So the range of colligative properties will be less in colloids. Why? Because in colloids and solution, what is the difference? Here the size is in between 1 to 1000 nanometer, where it is less than 1 nanometer. So solution particles are very small, whereas colloidal particles are very large. When size of particle is bigger, the number of particles will be lesser. When size is small, the number will be more. That means solution has more number of particles when compared with colloid. So more the particles, more the range of colligative property. Why? Because colligative properties depends on number of particles. In solutions, particles are more because of small size. That's why solutions will exhibit more range of colligative property than the colloids. So that's just one statement is enough. The colligative properties are shown by colloids, but with low range when compared with solutions due to big size. Similarly, the second property is Brownian motion. So the motion of these colloidal particles are observed by Robert Brownian by using ultra microscope. So under an ultra microscope, the motion is identified by Robert Brownian. So that motion is called Brownian motion. The motion of particles will be in a zigzag manner. So like that, a zigzag motion of particles are there. So this zigzag motion is called, we are calling as Brownian motion. Why the motion is zigzag motion? Because the reason whenever they are asking, the motion of the particle is due to unbalanced collision between dispersed phase and dispersion medium. Since dispersion medium solvent, dispersed phase solute, there is a very large size difference are there. So due to these size differences, the collisions are not balanced. So due to this imbalanced collisions, they will move randomly in a zigzag manner. So that is called Brownian motion. So that's it, the Brownian motion, zigzag motion. Another one is Tyndall effect. So actually, due to just lack of time, I am explaining very fastly, just like as a revision, because surface chemistry is a very easy chapter. Simply by reading the NCERT textbook, you can understand every topic. So whatever the doubts you are having, you can message me, I will explain. The next is the Tyndall effect. So what is the Tyndall effect is? It is the process of scattering of light by the big size particles. So we know that colloids are big size particle, and through this colloidal solution, when we are passing light directly cannot be transmitted, it will be scattered. So that scattered light is visible to us like a path, and that is called Tyndall effect. Suppose we are passing light through two solution. So one is the true solution, another one is the colloidal solution. So the transparent glass we are taking, in that one we are taking true solution, another one is colloidal solution. So through this, when we are passing light, any light we can pass. Simply for example, for best result, we are passing laser light. So when we are passing a light, so light is transmitting through the solution but does not visible to us. But same light when we are passing through this colloidal solution, the total path is visible to us. Here path is not visible, here path is visible. So true solutions, light path is not visible. In colloidal solutions, path of the light is visible. So the emission of this path of light is due to Tyndall effect. Why here path is visible? When light is passing through these colloidal solutions, in colloidal solution particle sizes are bigger. So when light is transmitting, these particles will scatter the light in each direction. So each particle will scatter the light in all direction. So that scattered light is visible like a path. But here particles are very small size in solution. So they cannot scatter. So light is transmitted here, and light is scattered. So Tyndall effect statement, it is the process of scattering of light by the big size particles. Due to this scattering, path of the light is visible. For example, blue color of sky. Actually there is no color for the sky. When sun rays are passing from the sun to the atmosphere, so there are reaching the number of particles. They contain some ozone particles are there, also some dust particles are there. All these particles will scatter the light actually. So the scattered light is visible like a blue color. The blue color of light is also due to Tyndall effect. Same like tails of comets. So comets means stars which contain some tails. So in the stars some tails are there. The tails is also due to Tyndall effects. Whenever dust particles are present in the stars, they will scatter the light. That is also visible like a path. So all these are due to Tyndall effect. For best example, we cannot see air because air is a homogeneous mixture. It is a solution. But we can see the smoke because smoke is a colloid. So that colloid will scatter the light, and that scattered light is visible to us. So that's why we can watch smoke, but we cannot watch air. That is the main reason. Air is a homogeneous, whereas smoke is a heterogeneous. That's why smoke is visible to us. Smoke is also gas, nothing but that is a colloidal gas. That's why it is visible to us. So Tyndall effect is scattering of light by the mixed particle. Another property, electrophoresis. Electrophoresis. So it is the identification of charge on the colloidal particles. To identify charge, we can use one instrument. The process is called electrophoresis. So simply say this: in electrophoresis, by applying electric field, the charge of the colloid we can identify. So we are taking a colloidal solution. On applying electricity, this colloidal solution will be migrated towards the opposite charge electrode. Suppose the charge of the colloid is positive, it will attract it towards negative. If its negative charge is there, it will attract it towards positive. So the identification of charge on the colloidal solution is called electrophoresis. So during the electrophoresis, whenever colloid is attracted towards opposite charge, some neutralization is possible. So this neutralization is called coagulation. You will see coagulation now. So electrophoresis just identification technique of charge by passing external electric field. So same like another important fifth one is coagulation. Most important. So what is the coagulation is? Coagulation is a process of destabilization of colloid. If colloid we are destabilizing, then that process is called coagulation. That means the stability of colloid completely or breaking or damaging. The process is called coagulation, which is also called flocculation. Coagulation or flocculation. So this coagulation can be done either by physical technique or by chemical technique. Physical technique means with the change of temperature. Chemical technique means by adding some extra electrolytes. For example, egg is a colloid. Egg albumin, white color liquid is a colloid. On increasing temperature or on boiling, it will be coagulated. So the boiling of egg is called coagulation. After boiling, the activity of the colloid is completely damaged. So colloid is completely broken. That process is called coagulation. In chemical technique, we add opposite charge electrolytes. For example, we are taking colloid blood. Blood is a negative colloid. The charges I already given. Blood is a negative colloid. So to coagulate blood, we can add any positive electrolyte. Suppose we are adding FeCl3. In this FeCl3, Fe charge will be 3 plus. So these ferric ions will coagulate or will neutralize the negative charge. Charge is negative and positive ions will be neutralized. So on neutralization, blood undergo coagulation. So by adding opposite charge ion, we can neutralize or we can coagulate the colloid. That is, for example, blood we are taking. So blood is coagulated by positive ions. That's why whenever some bleedings are happening through cuts, so we can apply positive charge ions like potash alum. Potash alum contain Al3 plus ions which coagulate the blood. That means will stop the bleeding. So to stop the bleeding, we use potash alum because it will coagulate the blood. So coagulation means destabilization of colloid either by physical or by chemical technique. So in this we have to identify two properties. One is the population power, another one is the populating value. Population power and populating value. So two definition, populating power and populating value. What is the populating power is? It is the charge of an electrolyte added to coagulate. Charge of an electrolyte added to coagulate a given colloid. So coagulating power depends on charge. For example, as I told, blood is a negative colloid. For this blood, I am adding NaCl and MgCl to FeCl3. They will ask which has high coagulating power. Coagulating power is the charge of an electrolyte. More the charge, more the coagulating power. It is the negative colloid. It is neutralized by positive ions. Here the positive ion is Na plus, Mg2 plus, Fe3 plus. So positive, all are positive ions, Na, Mg2 plus, Fe3 plus. But here positive charge is higher. It has high capacity of neutralization, a high capacity of coagulation. That's why it has high coagulating power. The order of coagulating power will be NaCl greater than MgCl2 FeCl3. This is more coagulating power. More the charge, more the coagulating power. Similarly, coagulating value. It is the amount of electrolyte in millimoles added to coagulate in 2 hours. So in 2 hours, to coagulate a given colloid, how much amount of electrolyte in millimoles we have to add? That is called coagulating values. The definition of coagulating value: amount of electrolyte in millimoles added to coagulate a given colloid in 2 hours. So coagulating value inversely to coagulating power. Remember it? Coagulating value inversely to coagulating power. Why? Because it has coagulating power is very high. That means it can better coagulate when compared with other. Since it has high power, the required amount will be lesser. The lesser the amount, higher the power. That's why it is less coagulating value. Since it has less charge, it required more amount to coagulate the colloid. That's why it required more amount. That means more coagulating value. So power is depends on charge. Higher the charge, higher the coagulating power. And charge is higher, required amount will be lesser. That's why coagulating value, coagulating power, both are inversely related. This is the most important question. They will give some charge salts. So based on the charge, we have to identify which has high coagulating power or high coagulating value. So this is the most important. So that's about coagulation. Another last property is there. That is the protection. So what is the protection is? So we have seen the classification of colloids based on interaction. So based on interaction, 2 types of colloids are there. One is the lyophilic, another one is the lyophobic. We know that lyophilic is more stable, lyophobic is less stable. So what the protection says that if we want to stabilize lyophobic, we have to add some amount of lyophilic. So addition of lyophilic will stabilize the lyophobic colloid, and that process is called protection. So protection is a process of stabilization of lyophobic by adding lyophilic. So protection is a process of stabilizing lyophobic by adding lyophilic. Because lyophilic is already stable, it can stabilize the lyophobic also. That process is called protection. And what are the stabilizings are there? That is the lyophilic. So lyophilic has some protection capacity. The protection capacity we are calling as protecting power. Each lyophilic colloid has some protecting power or protective power because it can protect the lyophobic. That's capacity we are calling as protecting power. The protecting power of lyophilic colloid can be determined with the help of one statement that is called gold number. So, with the help of gold number value, we can identify protective power of lyophilic colloid. So, this protective power inversely proportional to gold number. That means if gold number value is high, protective power is low. If gold number value is low, protective power will be high. So what exactly gold number is? It is the amount of lyophilic colloid we are adding to stabilize lyophobic. So to stabilize lyophobic, we must add lyophilic. So how much amount we are adding? That amount is called gold number. So gold number is the amount of lyophilic we are adding to stabilize the lyophobic. If we are adding very high amount of lyophilic, that means it is not protecting. That's why we are adding more amount. If you are adding less amount, that means it is highly protecting. Even if small amount it is protecting means it has high protecting power. So amount is less, protective power is high. So that's why protective power and gold number both are inversely related. So this is the most important. Gold number, protective power both are inversely proportional. So this is about the properties of colloids. Last one important one is there, that will be the emulsions. So emulsions also types of colloids. So colloids are total 8 types. Among that, liquid in liquid is also one type colloid. So that liquid in liquid type colloid we are calling as emulsion. So emulsions are liquid in liquid type colloids. So liquid in liquid. So such colloids are called emulsions. Emulsions are mainly two types. One is called oil in water type. Another one is called water in oil type. Oil in water type and water in oil type. So sometimes in place of oil we can use fat also. Fat in water or water in fat also they can ask. So what is oil in water means? So oil, water, both are liquids. But both nature is different. So this is a highly viscous, this is less viscous liquid. So when oil percent is less, when water content is more, then that is called oil in water type emulsion. Example, milk, paints and vanishing creams. All these are the oil in water types. We are observing milk. Milk is some dissolved fats in water. So water content is more, fat content is less. So that is oil in water type. Similarly, water in oil type means water content will be less, oil content will be more. So examples here will be butter and all fairness creams. We use fairness creams. So these are water in oil type emulsions. All are liquids. One is highly viscous liquid, one will be less viscous liquid. So butter and fairness creams are water in oil type. Milk and paints are oil in water type. So two types of emulsions are there. But in emulsions, both dispersive phase and dispersion medium both are liquids. So liquids can be easily separated. So that's why emulsions are unstable. Normally, suppose best example milk. Within 1 day or 2 days, milk will be damaged by itself. So because in both are liquids can be easily separated. So fat is separated, water is separated. So like that, so emulsions are highly unstable. So to stabilize these emulsions, we must add additional materials. So those additional materials are called emulsifying agents. So emulsions can be stabilized by adding emulsifying agents. So that emulsifying agents, different types of agents are there. For water, oil and water type, the emulsifying agents are natural and synthetic soaps and proteins and gums, etc. Similarly, for water in oil type, heavy metal salts of fatty acids and long chain alcohols and even lamp black. Lamp black means nothing but carbon. Just examples they will ask. Emulsifying agents for oil in water type, natural and synthetic source, proteins and gums. For example, say this. For milk we are taking. Milk is a oil in water dispersed. So this is a water. It contains some oil droplets like this. So oil when present in water, that is oil in water type. Just example milk. But emulsions are unstable. So both oil and water can be easily separated. So to stabilize, we are adding emulsifying agent. For example, soaps we are adding. Soaps can stabilize milk. Why? Because the structure of soap I have already given. It has tail part, also head part. So when we are adding soap, so the soap tail part will be dissolved in this oil because this is oil soluble, whereas head part dissolved in water. So tail part dissolve in oil, head part dissolve in water. Like the tail part dissolve in oil, head part. So these soap particles will hold together this water and oil part. So in water, head part is there, in oil, tail part is there. So both will be hold together. So stabilization of emulsion will be takes place. That's why emulsifying agents are used to stabilize emulsions by protecting these two, dispersion phase and dispersion medium. So this is about emulsions. So some important uses are there. You can read that important uses of the colloids around us. So practice all this. So surface chemistry is a very easy chapter. Just read all the NCERT material is there. So you ask any doubt present. Thank you very much.